Welcome to AFibulous Life, Unlimited Conversation, the podcast where we explore what it really means to live, adapt, and thrive with atrial fibrillation. Hosted by Jim Caveney, this is a space for real stories, expert insights, and honest conversations about heart health, resilience, and life beyond diagnosis, because AFib doesn't define you. And with the right support, your life can still be unlimited.
And welcome back to AFibulous Life Unlimited Conversation. This is your host, Jim Caveney. We are doing a HRS, Heart Rhythm Society, wrap-up today. Brief synopsis, really brief synopsis of the last 2 days of HRS, because there's far too many things that came out of that meeting that for me in which to capture in a few couple of minutes here. But I'm going to really highlight some of the key things that did come out. But first and foremost, what I want to emphasize is, again, I am not a physician. I'm not a healthcare provider. I am a patient that has had significant experience in the AFib space. My whole goal of AFibulous Life Unlimited Conversation is to provide you with additional information about the disease state, about how to manage things, about how to make your life bigger, better, and greater post-diagnosis. And how to manage it and live with your diagnosis, because we truly believe that everybody can become a center of excellence. However, I'm not providing you medical advice. I'm just providing you information. Please follow up with your healthcare providers as you see fit. So let's get back into what happened with Chicago. Now, the podcast earlier in the week covered what happened on Thursday and Friday of last week in Chicago, which were great outcomes and discussion points around lifestyle and everything else that's been kind of coming around. So now let's talk a little bit about what happened over the weekend, because that was not a restful weekend. It was a busy weekend, lots of information. So they wrapped up yesterday, which was Sunday, and I'll walk you through some of the biggest news from the final 2 days, right? So as always, I'm going to put this special spotlight on what I think matters most, how we're moving toward a more complete lifestyle-centered approach to heart health. So let's start with what I think is the most important story of the entire weekend. And this comes to be wearables. They are now, I guess, considered to be real medicine. And here it is, right? So a study called PAWS, P-A-W-S, the Pediatric Apple Watch Study, was presented Saturday morning. Now, this gave researchers an interesting opportunity where they gave Apple Watches to 107 kids between the ages of 6 and 18, all of whom were being evaluated for early stages palpitations. They wore the watches for 6 months alongside the traditional patch monitors that doctors normally use. Well, what were the results out of this? Well, the Apple Watch actually captured arrhythmia events that the traditional patch monitors missed. So in children with ordinary off-the-shelf consumer technology, that's pretty impressive, right? So why does this matter? Because for years, the conversation about wearables has always been interesting, but not quite ready for prime time. Now, maybe that conversation started to be a little bit more conclusive and say maybe there is some relevancy to them. So almost 1 in 4 Americans with cardiovascular disease wears a fitness tracker. I wear one myself, right? The question is no longer whether or not these devices belong in heart care. The question really is how we integrate them responsibly, equitably, and in a way that actually improves outcomes. This connects directly to the lifestyle thread that we're always running through the entire week in my existence and my discussions on AFibulous Life here. So Friday's HRS scientific statement on digital health tools was clear. Wearables, apps, and remote coaching, right, are how we scale lifestyle care to the people who can't easily get into a specialist. For our work across the country, right, this is the playbook. Patients do not need to drive 2 hours to a tertiary medical center to get good heart care. We're starting to see this evolution take place. They can get a lot of great care remotely through a smartwatch, a coach, and a connected care team. This is coming to us today and tomorrow. So the technology exists. So what's been missing in the delivery model and the reimbursement structure? Both of those are starting to move, which is great. So we're starting to see some really great initiatives, both on the reimbursement side of things as well as the technology. So it's coming to a head in a very positive and aggressive manner, which is awesome for health care across the world, particularly, when we're talking about rural healthcare initiatives, patients in the rural setting who, as I just mentioned, might have to drive 2 to 3 hours to get to a physician. If we connect either telephonically or virtually, that is going to be great because we'll be able to keep and build a community around these individuals, even though they live in a relatively isolated area. So now let's skip a little bit to the procedural side of things because there was big news there too. So on Sunday morning, results from a trial called Avant-Garde, Avant-Garde, were presented. This was the first large randomized clinical trial directly compared pulse field ablation. We've talked about that a little bit the other day, right? Pulse field ablation, that's the newer, gentler form of the AFib procedure, right? Against antiarrhythmic drugs in patients with persistent atrial fibrillation. And bottom line, the procedure won, right? So decisively, patients did significantly better with PFA than with medication. So for the millions of people with persistent AFib who've been cycling through drugs, right? I was one of those. I didn't get PFA, I got the RFA, which was the radio frequency ablation. But for millions of those people with AFib who've been cycling through drugs, don't have to always wait maybe. Now PFA, again, in discussion with your healthcare provider, might be able to provide an option for you to overcome some of the challenges you've been facing. Now, this is a real shift. It starts to strengthen the case for going to the procedure earlier than waiting, and you're going to hear that, and we heard that a lot over the course of the conference, that people are starting to say, let's move the procedure up sooner because maybe we'll actually prevent some of the further down the line outcomes that can come out of an AFib that comes back, right? So this is really exciting for for AFib care because the evolution of PFA is coming so rapidly, the adoption is rapid, but we also want to be cautious and make sure that as things go forth, we're going to keep reviewing the clinical trials that are going to start to talk about the safety and the longevity as more and more patients get exposed to this. So this is great. This certainly strengthens the case for it. And just to underline how fast this field is moving, another trial called Fulcrum VT was presented Sunday, and this showed that a new ultra-low temperature ablation technology was effective for ventricular tachycardia. Now, that's different than AFib. That's a more dangerous heart rhythm problem than AFib, often associated with sudden cardiac death. So these folks, if there is some hope for them through this clinical trial, that's amazing. Again, if you're somebody that's suffering from a ventricular tachycardia, please follow up with your healthcare providers to see if there's some opportunities out there for you, because that is a challenging situation. Now, the procedure itself in this situation successfully eliminated nearly all targeted abnormal rhythms with very low complication rates. Again, refer to the clinical trials and the data there. This is not espousing any one procedure over the other. And then a separate trial called CAD VT, and that's CAAD -VT, showed catheter ablation reduced ventricular tachycardia events in patient populations that have historically been left out of a clinical trial, patients with non-ischemic heart disease. Okay, so the headline on the procedural side is this: ablation done earlier, done with better technology, done in more diverse patient groups, right, is becoming potentially a standard of care. Now let me bring that back to where we started. Here's the truth about where heart rhythm is going. It's not procedures versus lifestyle. It's not technology versus prevention. It's all of it integrated in a way that meets patients where they live. The doctor doing the ablation, the smartwatch on the wrist, the lifestyle coach helping people lose weight, sleep better, manage stress, treat their sleep apnea, the medications when needed, and the digital infrastructure all ties together. This is exciting. So all of us, we're not in competition. We should be fully unified in moving forward the atrial fibrillation case to say, hey, this is a holistic solution because we're going to treat the person as a whole person, all aspects of those individuals, both mentally and physically, as we try to overcome these challenges together. So that's the future this meeting kept pointing us towards. And it's the future our work across the country is starting to deliver to people who, until now, have been certainly left out of it because of their location. So this is all exciting news. So this was a quick little summary of what's been happening or what happened at HRS in Chicago. I'm excited to provide you with more information as it comes out. In the meantime, I look forward to connecting with you again on the next podcast. We'll be having another guest come in, talking live with us about what happens post-diagnosis from a mental perspective. Where is our anxiety? Where is potential depression settling in? How do we potentially overcome that? So we'll be having that conversation early next week, and we'll get that podcast out to you soon. But in the meantime, please stay unlimited. Have an AFibulous afternoon, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.